Good afternoon, gentlemen, and statistically speaking, at least one lady. I'm trying something new. Basically, this game is so dead in terms of a content standpoint from Ash and Iron that we basically have to open up the vault and take out old content and try to enjoy it in some way. So what I'm going to be doing from now into the foreseeable future is taking out exotics that everybody thinks are bad and trying to make them good. And for this first episode, we have the Mask of Fealty. Now, for those of you who are not hunter mains, what the Mask of Fealty does is give you the exotic perk Null Factor, which reads, Withering Blades, hits and bounces, create a small stasis crystal and refund a portion of melee energy. Using Withering Blade to shatter crystals or frozen targets releases a spread of Withering Blade. Now, practically speaking, what this means is that for every hit and bounce of the Withering Blade, you're going to be getting 7.5% of your melee ability energy based on your melee stats. So higher melee stat, you're going to be refunded a larger portion of your building energy. Additionally, the first and third bounce of the Withering Blade spawn a small stasis crystal, and whenever you shatter the aforementioned stasis crystal or a frozen enemy with a Withering Blade, it releases an additional spread of 3 Withering Blades, which all can theoretically do the same combination, of which the 3 sub-Withering Blades that spawn from the Mask of Fealty are all capable of each spawning their own stasis crystals and ricocheting up to 3 times and spawning stasis crystals if they are able to hit enough targets, and we will find out very, very quickly there are never enough targets. On paper, Mask of Fealty does a lot. Now, how to extract the most value from this, that was something that I struggled with for quite a while, but on paper, this is a relatively powerful exotic as long as you can get a build cooking. So you say to yourself, how do I get the most use out of Mask of Fealty? Do I run Stasis or do I run Prismatic? Well, lucky for you, I'm going to be giving you a build for both Stasis and Prismatic. The Stasis build I found is a little bit more consistent. However, the Prismatic build is a little bit more powerful. I will explain when I get to it. Fair warning, this is relatively in-depth, so if you just want to skip to the very end or just see a general overview of the build, skip to the timestamp you're going to be seeing on screen right now. If you don't care about skipping and want a full explanation, I'm going to get right into it right now. First, taking a look at the pure stasis variant of this build. For the abilities, we obviously are going to want to have Gambler's Dodge, the ability to just instantly get back your shuriken just by clicking your class ability, no matter where you are in reference to the enemies, is just genuinely broken. Gambler's Dodge is one of the best abilities in the game since the Edge of Fate update, and it is going to remain that way until they change the way that ability regeneration works. Obviously for your shurikens, and then for your option of grenade, I preferred running this with Duskfield Grenade. I can see an argument for Glacier Grenade. However, Cold Snap, I don't think it is as useful as the other two due to the fact that it isn't consistently spawning stasis crystals, and it has a slightly longer cooldown as long as the tracking on the Cold Snap Grenade is a little bit unreliable depending on the terrain it has to go across. For the aspects, you can do one of 2 things. I liked using this build with Touch of Winter specifically because it gave the Duskfield Grenade a stasis crystal on impact, and basically hitting a wombo combo Duskfield Grenade into a Withering Blade I felt was the strongest that this build was, just purely by using abilities with no priming whatsoever. Duskfield with the Touch of Winter into Withering Blade, it was just the best for me. And for your other aspect, this is a no-brainer. Grim Harvest just to spawn stasis shards. If you did not want to use Touch of Winter, I can see a universe where Winter Shroud would be useful just because you are able to generate Frost Armor off of slowing targets with the artifact this season, but I much prefer Touch of Winter and Grim Harvest. Moving on to the fragments, there are 4 mandatory and 1 optional fragment. So for your mandatory fragments, we're starting off with Whisper of Conduction. It is just consistency and stats. Stasis Shards tracking to your position is very, very good. The Whisper of Shards, you're going to be shattering stasis crystals pretty much as your entire gameplay loop, and getting the bonus to grenade recharge rate will allow your other abilities to recharge faster. Whisper Charge is a no-brainer. Defeating targets while you have Frost Armor has a chance to create a stasis shards. Whisper of Change, again, this is a no-brainer. You are always going to have Frost Armor. You are always going to be generating stasis shards as long as you can keep that combo running. And finally, for your last of the mandatory ones, Whisper of Fissures increases the damage and size of a burst of stasis when you destroy a crystal or defeat a frozen target. Again, this is just a mandatory. It is a no-brainer. The one that I feel you have a little bit of play with is Whisper of Refraction. Whisper of Refraction, I feel, works a little bit better when you are using Winter Shroud because you are able to use your class ability to slow a target, which then you would defeat a slowed or frozen target and you would get additional class ability energy. But there's also another universe where I was running this with Whisper of Hunger, which just increases the melee energy gain from picking up stasis charge. This was a little bit more consistent. It was a little bit more consistent. The reason why I was using Whisper of Refraction with Touch of Winter instead of Winter Shroud is because you're always going to be using your Gambler's Dodge anyway. And if you look at my current stat split, I was running it with 96 class, just getting an even larger chunk back of my class ability energy meant that it was more often getting my Withering Blades back, and combined with the mods I was using on my armor, it all just worked. I ran Whisper of Refraction more than I ran Whisper of Hunger. The problem was never not having enough Withering Blades. The problem was always having a stasis shard in the first place to be able to use the Withering Blade against. Now, this is the prismatic variant of the build. Starting off with the super, your super, it is just depending on what you want to use for any given activity. Moving on to the abilities, as always, Gambler's Dodge. I'm not going to explain it again. Withering Berry, do need it for the build. And for your grenade, it depends on what... It really depends on what you need. Grapple works for the powered melee, aspect of the build. Having those as a fragment, I would stay away from Magnetic Grenade. I'd stay away from Arcbolt Grenade and Duskfield Grenade, having a slow and a freeze, but the freeze, it takes a while. You know, you're going to be freezing red bars in like 2 seconds, but it's usually just faster to shoot them and get headstone rather than using the Duskfield to generate a frozen target to hit with the Withering Blade. I was using Swarm Grenade more often than not. Moving on to Winter's Shroud, dodging slows nearby targets. It is the best of the worst for a build like this. Stylus Executioner was more important because performing Stylus Executioner, your next melee attack while invisible weakens targets. Pretty much if you are defeating a target affected by any elemental debuff does count, slows and being frozen. So you're going to be going invisible pretty much every single time off cooldown whenever you kill somebody with this build, and you are able to weaken with your Shuriken. So if it is a bigger target, you're going to be getting a lot of value out of Stylus Executioner. If anything, you could probably switch out Winter Shroud with something like Threaded Spectre or Gunpowder Gamble if you value having an additional fragment slot. I can show you what that would look like with an additional fragment slot later, but this is how I was running it more often than not. Your fragments, there isn't a lot of wiggle room with these. I would pretty much stick exclusively to Fragments of Hope, Fragments of Command, Facet of Dawn, and Facet of Ruin. Facet of Ruin is very self-explanatory. If you are running any stasis build or any Solar Condition build, you want Facet of Ruin. Facet of Dawn is because you're going to be just sending off pretty much an infinite number of Withering Blades. Each Withering Blade counts as a powered melee, so you could pretty much stack your Radiant Timer infinitely. Facet of Command, defeating frozen or suppressed targets, creates a stasis shard or void breach. You need this to be able to generate enough stasis shards to get this build working. And Facet of Hope, while you have an elemental buff, that being Frost Armor, your class ability regenerates more quickly, and I was using Facet of Hope with Winter Shroud, so I would have Winter Shroud to slow. I would have the Facet of Hope while I have Frost Armor, I have a quicker class ability, and then while I have Facet of Command, anything that is slowed, it's going to be hit with a stasis shard. If anything, Facet Dawn is really the only one of these that I would consider switching out, depending on if you can get another source of Radiant or another source of a damage buff, really. But Radiant is just one of the best, it's just damage buffs in the game. If you can get it while running solo with Facet Dawn, that is pretty much going to be all you need. If anything, I would say you can replace Facet Dawn with Facet Devotion if you wanted to invest a little bit heavier into the Transcendence playstyle. But at the same time, if you wanted to invest more into the Transcendent playstyle, I would change out Winter Shroud for a Gunpowder Gamble, and I would then throw on Facet Devotion in this final slot. This is going to give you enough light ability regen. It's going to give you enough light ability regen with these where you're going to be getting your Transcendent up very, very frequently. You pair that with a light super, that being Deadfall, Storm's Edge, or Golden Gun Marksman. I think you'll be in a good spot, but besides that, really none of the other fragments are going to be worth considering. Moving on to the artifact, like always for artifact column 1, it really doesn't matter. Pick whatever 3 you need so you can move on to the next column. For the second column, the only one of these that is going to be actually mandatory is Flame Fiber and Freeze, because it combines your stasis mods into one, and getting your stasis siphon combined in with your solar weapon. It gives you a little bit of increased utility if you are running a solar secondary. Besides that, one with Frost is kind of a no-brainer, only because the rest of the 5 in column 2, you just need to pick one, and Frost Armor is the best of the worst for this type of build. For artifact column 3, this is where it starts getting juicy. Fever and Chill, basically rapid precision hits with stasis weapon grant Frost Armor. This is any stasis weapon. This is very, very important. The secondary effect, I say, of rapid precision hits with solar weapon, if you didn't have any way to generate radiant, if you did use a variant of the build that didn't use the power to melee gives you radiant, you'd be able to use a solar secondary like I am in this build, like a Nullify or any other solar primary ammo weapon. This would be fine. Elemental Benevolence is very important. Granting allies an elemental buff gives class ability energy. If you're running solo, this is a little bit less important, but you still need to pick a couple from this column to get access to the further columns, and reciprocal draw wasn't useful for me. Frost Renewal, very important. Well, you have Frost Armor, taking critical damage releases a burst that freezes nearby enemies and grants Frost Armor to you and nearby allies. So basically, whenever you get down to critical health, this is just going to refresh your Frost Armor timer, and it's going to let you keep that DR until you die. Essentially, if you have allies near you, this is going to be very useful for them. Moving on, Refreshing Threads, picking up an elemental pickup matching your subclass element, or picking up a Tangle with a Strand Super equipped grants energy to your least charge ability. If you are running the Stasis subclass version of this build, this is going to be more useful to you. If you are running the Prismatic variant of this build and you're not using Silence and Squall, this is going to be a little bit less useful to you, because you're not going to be generating other types of elemental pickups as frequently as you are Stasis shards. So this would really be the only argument for what I would see as running Silence and Squall in Prismatic over something like your Strand Super. Moving on to artifact column 4. This one really isn't difficult. There are 2 that I may consider: Cauterized Darkness, but that is only if you are running a solar secondary or heavy weapon. And besides that, Elemental Coalescence, defeating targets has the chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element for your stasis variant of this build. Obviously, this is going to generate stasis shards if you are just killing enemies, period. And if you're running the Prismatic variant of this build, it is just pick your poison on whatever super you're running. You're going to be able to generate elemental pickups. It combos a little bit with Refreshing Threads, but yeah, that's pretty much it. And finally, for artifact column 5, I wish I could have 3 perks in this, but if we had to choose 2, since we do, Frigid Glare. While Frost Armor is active, Stasis Precision Final Blows causes combatants to release a freezing burst. This combos really well because, freezes enemies. You can hit them with the Withering Blade, which spawns your 3 more Withering Blades. And also Shield Crush, probably one of the best artifact perks we have ever seen. Besides Breach and Clear, this is one of the best we've ever seen. While you have a Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or Void Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals additional damage. While you are Amplified or Radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. This basically is it. If you're using Fast to Dawn or any other way to generate Radiant via Fever and Chill or elemental pickups, if you are using a Solar Super, Shield Crush is going to give your grenades increased damage and recharge faster. For me, using Dusk Fields, using Dusk Fields, or by using something like Swarm Grenade, this was very, very useful. And the Frost Armor component, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. Obviously, this applies and scales fantastically with your Withering Blades. So this is your artifact. There are no other variants besides this one that I would consider using in this version of the build. And for my armor mods, I'm not going to explain to you exactly how the armor mods work. Just know that they work. For your stats, you're going to want to have at least 70 class and at least 100 melee. Those are the only 2 important stats. The more melee you get past 100, the better. And the more class ability you get past 70, you have diminishing returns. So looking at the actual mods, Harmonic Siphon, Dynamo, Hands-On for the super energy on my helmet. For my gloves, Heavy-Handed, Bolstering Detonation, Focusing Strike, Heavy-Handed for the orbs, Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike for the additional class ability energy. For my chest piece, pick whatever dampeners you need based on whatever activity you are doing. For the boots, Absolution, Orbs of Restoration, and Insulation. This is my favorite combination. For a good-ish distribution for ability energy and healing whenever you pick up an orb of power. And finally, for the cloak, distribution, outreach, and class font. This is the only one I will explain. Class font, it's going to give you an additional plus 50 to your class ability stat whenever you have an orb of power, but you shouldn't be using this as a crutch. If you didn't want to use class font and you just wanted more ability energy, you could probably run bomber. This is the most efficient way to get the most out of these particular mods. Again, I'm not going to go into the math. Just trust me, it works. But besides that, for this version of the build, I'm using class font. And if you just wanted the overview of the build, here it is. You can see all the artifacts at the bottom. You can see all the weapon mods right there. I'm going to go into the subclass in just one moment. This is the stasis variant of the subclass. Here are the fragments. Moving on to the prismatic variant of the subclass. All right, moving on to the weapons. So, fortunately, unlike our fragments, we actually do have a few more options when it comes to the exotics we can use with this build. We have Wicked Implement, Aegir Scepter, Cryosthesia, and Verglass Curve. All of those do one or two really important things. In the case of Wicked Implement, Cryosthesia, and Verglass Curve, they very easily either can freeze targets or generate stasis crystals that we can then shatter with our Withering Blades. Now, Verglass Curve does the whole crystal bit a little bit easier than Cryosthesia or Wicked Implement. Wicked Implement has the benefit of having Headstone, so you are able to generate those whenever you get a precision kill, and Cryosthesia is good for priming literally any enemy in the game without actually killing them so that you can make the most use out of your Withering Blades instead of just getting a kill with the weapons. Aegir Scepter, I liked using more than any of those other options, specifically because this build really isn't powerful, and if you are wasting your exotic slot on something that basically has the same effect as Chill Clip, you want it to be relatively powerful. So, running Aegir Scepter, if you have the catalyst for it, you can use Ill Will Form and basically freeze any major and or champion. If you did not want to run any of those primary weapons and instead you choose to run Winter Bite just for more damage, because Winter Bite is a relatively good damage option in any season it has been in, very easily freezes, very easily makes crystals, very easily does a lot of damage, you would want to consider getting any primary weapon that rolls with Headstone. Summoning crystals based off of precision kills is easier than summoning crystals based off of killing a slowed enemy or a frozen enemy that is frozen by Chill Clip, so that's why I prefer Headstone over Chill Clip. There is a couple of weapons that have both Headstone and Chill Clip. Another perk you may want to consider is Rhyme Stealer, because for this build you do want to have Frost Armor up as much as humanly possible. If you did want a weapon that could roll both Rhyme Stealer and Chill Clip or Headstone, you could do something like Trachiness, or Trachiness, however you pronounce it, the brand new Rapid Fire Select Shotgun from the Arms Week event. It is capable of rolling Rhyme Stealer in Column 1, and it rolls either Chill Clip or Headstone in Column 2, and this is a tiered weapon, so you're able to get this with all the vast bonuses that come with Tier 5. However, this is a special ammo weapon, so if you wanted something that was a primary ammo weapon that could fit that role of having both Rhyme Stealer and or Headstone and Chill Clip at the same time, there are a couple options, but one is definitely better than the rest. I'm not going to go over all these individually, but these are things you can consider: Liminal Vigil, Judgment, Stay Frosty, Live Fire, Red Tape, Peace Bond, Redrix, Solemn Remembrance, and Faustus Decline. Those are the ones I'm not going to go over individually, but the two that I am going to go over individually are the ones that I would consider to be quote-unquote best in class for this type of build. That is the new Desert Perpetual Auto Rifle Intercalary, and a auto rifle that we got from 2 seasons ago, the Fair Judgment Pinnacle Weapon, or Ritual Weapon, whatever they're called nowadays. Now, Fair Judgment has the benefit of being able to just pick up from the tower. You can just get this because this previously was a reward for prestiging any of your vendors before. This one is super easy to get. It rolls naturally with 2 guaranteed perks, that being Rhyme Stealer and Headstone, and it also has Dynamic Sway Reduction and Onslaught. If you didn't want to use Headstone, if you could figure out a way to generate enough stasis crystals where you don't need to worry about having stasis crystals on the ground, you could probably run this with Onslaught, but normally I would just stay in the realm of using Rhyme Stealer and Headstone. I think that that is the best roll for Fair Judgment, but it only has 2 perks, so so it really isn't hard to pick the ones that you want. But Intercalary, this is the one that I would most prefer for this build. If you haven't used it already, Intercalary, the new epic Desert Perpetual auto rifle, it rolls with a lot of good perks. Specifically, for the purpose of this build, it has Headstone and it has Rhyme Stealer in perk column 3 and 4 respectively, and that's pretty much it. That is all you need. The purpose of Rhyme Stealer is to get consistent frost armor via destroying a stasis crystal or defeating a frozen target. The purpose of Headstone is to generate the aforementioned stasis crystal if you can't generate one yourself. If you did want to use this weapon, you could probably drop Headstone in place for something like Strategist. If you can roll with Strategist in perk column 3 and Rhyme Stealer in column 4, I feel like that Intercalary would fit very, very well with this build. However, if you think you are not going to need that much ability energy, even though this is a very ability energy heavy build, having these stasis crystals to destroy to get your ability energy will serve you well. So that's what I think, that if you aren't using a primary exotic, if you're using Winterbite in this build, I think that using Intercalary, if you can get it with the right roll, would be the best. Unfortunately, as the time of this recording, I don't actually have one, so most of the time I was playing with this build, I was either using Fair Judgment or Aegir Scepter, but you really can't go wrong with either of them for this build because, the ceiling and the floor are very, very close. Not having a weapon with the right roll isn't going to be make or break for this build. And now, finally, what should you use for your special weapon? Realistically, fill in wherever you need. If you're using a primary ammo weapon, have a special ammo weapon as your secondary. If you're using a special weapon, have a primary ammo weapon as your secondary. It is fairly self-explanatory. Just pick what you want. Maybe something that is able to give you ability energy back, something with Grenadier, something with Pugilist. It really, really doesn't matter. There is no heavy lifting that the special weapon can do that your primary stasis weapon isn't going to be doing already. It really is just one of those where it is pick what you want. This season specifically, there are okay solar synergies. There are okay solar synergies. So, maybe running a solar weapon to, proc Radiant off of this season's artifact, or to generate solar shrapnel if you choose to go down that route. There, you can't go wrong with any of it, but your special weapon pretty much doesn't matter. And so, with that all being said and done, is Mask of Fealty usable? Would I recommend anybody actually using this exotic? No, I wouldn't. Mask of Fealty is fundamentally flawed, and the reason for this, I feel, is the post Beyond Light balance changes to the Stasis subclass, where Hunter Shurikens did receive changes to the tracking behavior of them. So before, basically, these things were accurate as the stars, right? You could throw it and it would track somebody to the ends of the earth to actually hit them. And with that behavior, you're able to consistently hit frozen targets. However, as it stands now, with the tracking being altered slightly, it is just bad enough where, for example, if there is a stasis crystal on the ground and there is an enemy within your magnetism cone, if you throw your shuriken, there's a 50-50 chance that it is just going to fly towards the enemy and not detonate the stasis crystal. Now, some would say, oh, this is a skill issue, to which I would partially agree if it wasn't something that I was able to consistently replicate. So when using this build, it was very frustrating because you're trying to throw your shurikens to detonate the stasis crystals to spawn 3 more shurikens, which would then themselves spawn more stasis crystals when they hit enemies. You see the loop that we're trying to accomplish with this build. However, because of the nature of shurikens, they just don't behave that the way you want to have, that the way you want them to half the time. And not only that, the ricochets from the shurikens are nerfed severely. They have been nerfed since Beyond Light. So if you're trying to throw a shuriken and thinking, hey, this is going to hit 3 enemies, will be able to spawn the most crystals out of it, it barely hits 2. It really barely hits 2. And the shurikens themselves are no longer able to freeze most enemies when you hit them with 2. If miners don't die, hitting majors with these will not freeze them. It'll stack to 80 stacks of frost. It's not going to freeze them like it used to. In Crucible, it was a problem, but in PvE, it does matter a lot. And for those of you who are keen-eared enough to notice that not once in this video have I mentioned the word Crucible, that is for a good reason. I really tried to get this to work, but in Crucible, because of the way that the shurikens behave nowadays, it is pointless to actually. You can't use it. You can't use this. I have tried recording this 3 times. It is very, very frustrating to try to use an exotic. Not every exotic needs to work in every activity, mind you. Not every exotic is meant for every activity. You're not taking Celestial Nighthawk into Crucible, and usually you aren't taking Blind Ramparts into the day 1 raid, right? Different exotics are meant for different things. However, when a mechanic built into a subclass, that being the shurikens, has been nerfed to shit and not fixed in any way since Beyond Light. It's been 5 years. I understand that people are still scared of the idea of stasis being good. However, grow up. So, besides that, I want to thank each and every single one of you who are watching this video right now. If you haven't already, please remember, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know if Mask of Fealty is somehow your favorite exotic, and I just spent the better part of 11, 12 minutes just shitting on your very heart and soul. And I would like to say thank you all. Remember, you matter to somebody. Do something today. Do something good for somebody. All right? Take care now. God, this build is so ass, man. It's just impossible to make this thing good. It is actually impossible to make this thing good. Like, I tried. You can't do it. Like, the gameplay loop just does not support this thing being good. Mask of Fealty, I'm sorry, you are dog shit. Like, I don't know, man. Like, just design bad exotics and then fix them later. And then best part is, the rewards at the end, fucking soft lock. My name is Pete Parsons. I love to fuck up my studio. Wow, wow, wow.